Hi everyone, welcome to Itsy Bitsy's live read from Hula Girl by Laura Ward Cosio. Chapter 1. Ava. 1 week. It doesn't sound like very long until you break it down. 7 days. 168 hours. 604,800 seconds. I'm spending all that time in what most people would call paradise. The Hawaiian island of Maui. But for an admittedly type A personality like me, the passage of these first 2 days has been agonizing slow. I've tried to make the most of what amounts to an enforced vacation. Really, I have. I dutifully unplugged by leaving my lifeline, a top-of-the-line MacBook Pro, at home. I haven't called into the office to check with my assistant on pressing matters at all. I've only messaged my boss, Randall, once, but at least it wasn't about work. It was an Instagram worthy photo I've casually staged. The shot is of my toes in the nearly white and oh so soft sand, with a clear blue ocean in the background. I wanted to show him that I have taken his order to disengage from all stress seriously. He texted back, "That's a start. Go to a luau. Really decompress." He means well, that I know, but he should also know that that's the last thing I'm going to do is to dive deep into a tourist trap like a luau. Coming to Maui wasn't exactly my idea. Randall insisted that I take this time off. He went so far as to book my plane ticket and hotel, telling me both were covered by the firm as part of what he empathetically coined my rest and recovery benefits. No such benefits existed, of course. It's just one of the many ways he takes it upon himself to look after me. He's treated me like a daughter, or a granddaughter, I should say, given his age, almost as soon as I started working at the law firm of Miller, Newell, and Kahn 6 years ago. In return, I've come to think of him as a sort of surrogate grandfather. This unusual bond is the result of an incident that happened the day I interviewed with the firm, fresh out of law school. I wasn't the top contender for this entry-level job of the first-year associate, not with having graduated from an undistinguished school like Southwestern Law School without any internships under my belt. I'd sacrificed the vital experience of internships in favor of working double shifts at the high-end Beverly Hills restaurant that paid surprisingly well, even if I did have to slap away one or too many drunk hands of entitled rich men. I also was busy helping my mom with her housekeeping service, mobile maids, the business she started out of necessity after my father passed away unexpectedly when I was 13 years old. So while I ended up with great real-world experience, it wasn't the kind of background most law firms appreciated. I've applied for the position at Miller, Newell and Kahn, along with a dozen other firms I've placed in the no chance in hell category, figuring I'd have nothing to lose. They were the, they were the only one in that category to call me in for an interview. The interview process at the firm, like that in rigorous, to put it mildly, they had me in back-to-back meetings with all levels of staff, some as in individual interviews and other as panel interviews, throughout most of the day. There was even a coffee break and lunch break interview. Each person was seemingly more intent than the last on tripping me up with a question on some obscure law or case study, making for an intense day. But I held my own, outwardly at least. I was able to come up with credible answers, falling back on the study that had left me with virtually no social life for the last 7 years of undergraduate and law school combined. Inwardly, though, I was frazzled. By the time I had my last interview with Randall Miller, senior partner of the firm, I had barely held it together. Our time started innocuously enough with him asking all the typical questions about my studies and what I thought I could contribute to the firm. He stared at my resume the whole time, not having made eye contact with me since the initial glance we shared when I took my seat in front of his impressive caved mahogany desk at the start of our interview. His questions became more listless, and my answers got shorter. We were both flatlining, and I knew this didn't bode well. But my nerves and exhaustion made it hard to push through, especially when I had every indication from all my other interviews that I wasn't the right fit. They never said those words, of course, but I'm realistic enough to understand that as a Latina, I was fighting an uphill battle in a firm like this that is at least 90% white. Well, Miss Ruse, Randall said, clearly on his way to wrapping up the interview that had only lasted 12 minutes. I want to thank you for coming in. And there it was, the brush-off from the man who surely held the final word on my candidacy. I smiled ruefully and stood, extending my hand to him. When he rose, he was clearly struggling. I had researched him before this interview and knew he had a long, successful career. He started this firm after 7 years as an assistant district attorney, making it into a highly respected, multifaceted organization focused on the rigors of the law rather than gimmicks or loopholes. He was married with 4 children and 6 grandchildren, the picture of health for a man in his mid-70s. He was known to play tennis at a private club 4 times a week, but the moment he reached for my hand, the color drained from his face, and he staggered to the right. But before I could move, he went crashing down to the floor, trying and failing to hold on to the desk as he went, sending papers, books, and files down with him. If he had blacked out, he had already come to by the time I rushed around to the side of his desk. "Mr. Miller, are you okay?" I asked, moving to my knees on the floor beside him. He groaned but didn't reply otherwise. Instead, he blinked rapidly and shook his head, as if to reboot himself from unexpected shutdown. Just then the door to his office swung open, and the efficient secretary, who had earlier escorted me into the interview, gasped. "I think he's okay," I said. "I'll get Manny," she said, though she stood frozen in the doorway, "and call 911. That got another grunt out of Mr. Miller, along with a wave of his hand, which I took to mean he was trying to stop her from taking these actions. But she disappeared before he could make himself understood. "Can I help you up?" I asked. He was still propped awkwardly on his side where he had fallen. He nodded vigorously, and I reached down, slipping my arm underneath his. With considerable effort, I'm 5'5" with decent curves, while still being on the slimmer side, while he's at least 6'3" and over 200 pounds. I got him to his knees. Even during this brief moment, I could sense his discomfort at needing help. Like most men, he seemed proud and unaccustomed to asking for help. But really, I wasn't doing much, just trying to get him into a position where he could have more control. It didn't occur to me that it might not have been the best reaction, since he should have been evaluated by a medical professional. I just acted on instinct. The same could be said for why I reached out to smooth back his hair. It had gone askew during his fall, and I sensed he'd want to appear as put together as possible. "Randall, are you okay?" Mr. Miller and I both looked up to find Manfred Kahn, the sole remaining living partner in the firm, rushing toward us. I had released my hold on Mr. Miller, but we were now both on our knees, our bodies close, and I could feel the energy in the room change. It was so tense that it had almost hard to breathe. Mr. Miller stiffened, and I knew without having to examine his reaction that he was horrified that Kahn was seeing him this way. "I'm fine," he said. Though there was a catch in his voice, he was still shaken by what had happened. "Candance has called 911, Kahn said. "I don't need paramedics," he replied gruffly. He looked like he wanted to say more, but struggled to get the words out. It pained me to see him so vulnerable, so mortified by this moment. "It was silly," I blurted out, and all eyes turned to me. "I tripped over my own 2 feet when I got up to shake Mr. Miller's hand." I forced a laugh. "And bam! I went flying right into the desk and knocked everything over. Can you believe that? Just my nerves, I'm sure. Anyway, Mr. Miller was kind enough to help me clean up this mess I made. That's all." Is that right, Randall? Con asked. Because Candace was pretty sure you faded. Con's expression wasn't exactly the picture of concern. There was something much more like hope in his eyes. That kind of attempt to pry upon someone's weakness always makes my stomach turn. Again, without thinking, I burst out into laughter. Oh, goodness, no, I said. Mr. Miller was just being far too kind to me. I'm sure I've lost all the chance of this position here now. I'm so sorry about all the fuss. I stood, and before I could reach out to offer Mr. Miller my hand, he grabbed the edge of his desk and pulled himself to his feet, with only a barely audible grunt. It's no problem, Miss Roos, he said, meeting my eyes. Thank you for coming in today. I saw genuine gratitude in his gaze, but then he looked away, addressing his secretary. Candace, why don't you tidy this up? I have a match at the club in a half hour. I have to get going. I'm usually good at keeping my emotions under wraps, but I don't think I did a good job at hiding my disappointment at that moment. You're sure everything is okay? Con asked a little too eagerly. Perfectly fine, Mr. Miller replied with finality. I nodded to myself, gathered my attaché case and purse, and said quick, polite goodbyes to everyone before showing myself out. 2 days later, I got an offer from Human Resources. A good offer. I was dumbfounded, but not dumb enough to turn it down. It was 3 months of 12 to 14-hour days, 6 days a week of working at the firm before I had occasion to see Mr. Miller again. It was at one of the semi-regular office happy hours on a Friday evening. There was always casual affairs, designed mostly to throw the grunts like me a bone for working so tirelessly. The upper-level staff rarely attended. Partners never attended. That is, until Mr. Miller showed up. I watched him make perfunctory greetings to some of the other newbies before he reached me. Ms. Roos, he began, a pleasure to see you again. And you, Mr. Miller, how have you been? He hesitated, his intelligent gray eyes examining me for a moment. Just fine. I understood in that response that we were not to acknowledge his incident. That was perfectly fine with me. It had been awkward and stressful enough when it had happened. If he was ready to act like I'd never witnessed his moment of weakness, then so be it. Glad to hear it, I said. Listen, I understand you speak Spanish. Is that right? That was a curveball I wasn't expecting. Yes, I do. Perfect. I'm assembling a team for a case. We're meeting tomorrow morning at 9. I'd like you to join us. Me? I stammered. Like an idiot. But really, how was I to react when the senior partner of the law firm I had only barely started working for recruited me for his case team? This was less expected than that curveball. This was a knuckleball. Yes, I'm a baseball fan. See you tomorrow, Miss Roos, he replied, clearly unamused. Yes, sir. See you then. Girl, you have just landed the golden ticket, Tyler murmured, having sidled up to me like me. He was a first-year associate. We started the same week and almost immediately bonded over late-night takeout eaten at our desk as we lacked over our lack of love life, both of us longing for a boyfriend to go home to. In our fantasies, these boyfriends of ours would be waiting for us like a home-cooked meal and ready to rub our temples. Do you think? I asked. I don't think, I know. Take it for all it's worth. Uh-huh, I said, my eyes still glued to the back of Mr. Miller's silver hair head as he moved across the room. Oh, and if you need someone to speak gay, bring me in. Thank you for listening.